Coming up this week on Sporting Journal Radio, we're going to dig into the potential limits on mushroom foragers in Minnesota.
Because of this unknown problem, we're going to, either completely revoke your ability to hunt and forage mushrooms within a reasonable distance to your home.
Not all rules are bad, but some rules are just...
I fish, I hunt, and always will. Broadcasting from the Eau Claire Outdoor Studios. Presented by OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. We're not just a radio show anymore. This is Sporting Journal Radio. That's right. Welcome to the show. I'm Bret Amundson. Thank you for tuning in on the network by demand or watching this on YouTube. That's Dan Amundson right over there. Dan, how you doing?
Yo.
David
Hi.
Eckhardt. In that corner, in this corner, weighing in at 675 pounds.
Whoa.
He's not that big. David Eckhardt, Dan Amundson, Bret Amundson, thank you for joining us. We got a great show this week. We're going to dig into the potential limits on mushroom foragers in Minnesota. What does that mean? What could it look like? Should it even happen? We'll talk to a couple of experts, Mike Kempenich and Nicole Zempel, who spend more time foraging than probably the majority of, the majority of the country, let's be honest. We'll talk to them about it coming up in just a little bit. Also, Joe Henry will check in. He's fresh off a tournament on Lake Erie, actually. And we're going to discuss the similarities between the border water of Lake Erie with Canada and how that can be similar to the border water of Lake of the Woods, and talk about what's going on this time of year up at Lake of the Woods. First, though, Dan, who are this week's sponsors?
Live Target. Match the hatch at livetargetlures.com this summer. Lake of the Woods Tourism. Lake of the Woods is the walleye capital of the world. Plan a trip for this summer or winter or fall at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. Haybell Heights Campground and Resort on Devil's Lake. Book a trip to Devil's Lake at haybellheights.com. Ottertail Lakes Country. Find your inner otter at ottertaillakescountry.com. And Prairie Sportsman. The new season is all wrapped up. You can watch episodes anytime at the Prairie Sportsman YouTube channel.
So we have 4 YouTube channels for you to check out. Prairie Sportsman.
Whoa.
Tazin Lake Lodge, which we're leaving this week to go up to Tazin Lake to film for our Tazin Lake Lodge channel. A new season of Tazin TV is coming. Check it out. If you haven't watched it now, world record-sized lake trout and 50-inch northern pike. Check it out, Tazin Lake Lodge. We also have Sporting Journal Radio, of course. You may be on it right now. Make sure you like and subscribe. We appreciate it. And then our new one, Fish Hunt Forever. And Dan, we put a new video on the Fish Hunt Forever channel this week.
Yeah, we last year at the Aglow conference, we got to go to Dogwood Canyon, which has a pretty interesting story. We knew nothing about it except Larry Whiteley said, you gotta go. You gotta go. If you're coming to Branson, you gotta go. So we went and we filmed it. So you can see what we saw and see what you could expect. If you take a vacation to Branson, there's another thing you can do. We got up close and personal with some pretty big animals.
Yeah, we were there for the Aglow conference, and David, Johnny Morris, Bass Pro, he has a couple of properties down by Branson. Of course, the main Bass Pro is in Springfield there, and then down in Branson, he's got Top of the Rock,
yep,
and then also Dogwood Canyon. And basically, he looked at this beautiful property. Essentially, it's 2 canyons, and one, he said, I'm going to preserve it, and I'm going to enhance it, and I'm going to invite people to come to it to check it out. They've got all these waterfalls, and you can take tours, and it's like, I think we were on 2,200 acres we went through. They've got elk in captivity that you drive through.
You go into Arkansas.
You actually leave Missouri and come into Arkansas and come around. And buffalo, and then golden rainbow trout.
Interesting. You can fish for regular rainbow trout. There's a white buffalo. Remember the white buffalo? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And so they had a stretch of river that's guided, like fly fishing or trout fishing, and then a section of river that's do it yourself. And you can either just fish and catch and release, or you can take some home and pay by the pound. So it's a really interesting way to kind of get up close with nature and then bring the family. So if you want to bring kids, they got a Treehouse Masters, this giant treehouse right inside in a museum. It's a really cool property. And then the canyon next to it, he preserved that by just leaving it natural, leaving it wild. As our tour guide said, if a tree falls, then it falls and it stays there. Unless it's on the trail, then they got to take it off. But for the most part, they wanted to leave it and not see it get developed with condos and a bunch of houses. So it's a really neat area, and watch the video right now to see for yourself what it looked like on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel. All right, a couple of other things. There's a bear Deadline, excuse me, if you got a bear license in the lottery, you have to purchase it by August 1st, and then surplus licenses will be available August 8th. The elk lottery results are out. We did not get an elk tag.
Nope, we sure did not. We were fighting for what, one of 7? Well, I don't know what date and zone you put in. I was fighting for one of 2 tags. So the odds were not ever in my favor.
One of 2 tags. Yeah. I think there's like 3,500 people or so on average that apply. And this year, David, I don't know if you saw it, but they reduced the number of tags in Minnesota for state residents down to 17. Normally it's been in that 30, 40-ish area. And one of the reasons they decreased it this year is because Red Lake is taking part now, and they increased their tribal allotment of tags from 5 to 30 this year. So we went from, I think, 42 to 17, and they went from 5 to 30. But we did not draw a tag.
No.
This year,
so. My sources said that there were 34 people from the Red Lake Nation that applied. So
well, they all got all but 4.
Just about, yeah. Sorry for those 4 folks. It sucks to be you, I guess.
That'd be worse. I think that'd be worse if it was one of 2 tags and 3,400 people applied.
Yeah, but then your odds are going to be pretty good next year.
And if you had 30 tags and 34 people applied.
Yeah, but
you were one of the 4 that didn't get a tag.
But think about this: if there's only 34 people there that had interest, maybe more people will be interested next year. But okay, all those 30 people might be done. I don't know if there's this once in a lifetime, I guess. But
I don't know.
But if it is, then now those 4 people are pretty much guaranteed a tag next year if things don't change, if they stay the way they are right now. But who knows what'll happen?
Well, we discussed the elk tag situation and the elk herd population and what's going on in the northeastern part of Minnesota pretty extensively last week on the show.
Yes.
So check it out. Watch last week's show to learn more on the Sporting Journal Radio YouTube channel, or go to sportingjournalradio.com. David, how are you?
And let us know if you did get drawn.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. What he said. Yeah. And you can download this wherever you get podcasts.
We want to film an elk hunt in Minnesota for Prairie Sportsmen. So if you drew an elk tag, let us know, because we want to come film it this fall for Prairie Sportsmen. So yeah, comment below or get a hold of us. You can reach us on the Contact Us page at sportingjournalradio.com. David, you're planting more food plots this week?
Yep. Getting my turnips and stuff planted.
All right. What? And we talked about it last week, why you decided to wait until this time. This year it's a little bit earlier.
Yep.
Rain. So do you worry about storms after you plant?
No, I hope for rain, actually, because, you don't get any rain. The seed's just going to lay there.
Well, what if it's too much? I mean, can you get Wilmer got 4 inches in that storm this past week.
Yep.
Can that be too much? Can that wash the seeds out, or do you plant them down deep enough?
It could wash. I mean, it's going to wash everything if you get 4 inches of rain, but if it doesn't wash it, it'll just pack the ground, which isn't a problem.
That's not so bad.
Yeah.
So if there's 6 inches of rain coming down in an hour, are you out there just trying to cover the whole thing with a tarp?
Got a ground screw like a baseball,
baseball game. Yeah.
Get the tarp.
Yeah, cover it up. No, it's whatever happens. If something washes out, just replant it.
How's the corn looking? Corn and beans?
They're looking good. They could use some rain.
Are you at 13 feet with your corn now, or did you grow?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that one since.
What's the most cobs of corn you've seen on a single stalk before?
3, maybe 4, but I don't know if they were all,
fully developed.
Fully developed, yeah.
Have you have 20 trail cameras, but you only have 1 up? Did you put any more up yet?
No. When I go in to plant the rest of the food plots, I'll
put the rest
bring
up.
all my. I got to go buy 200 AA batteries.
You haven't gotten into the solar deal yet?
No, I have not. I need to look into it because those little batteries are expensive.
Yeah. Lithium batteries and solar chargers.
Yeah.
That'll be the way to go. We're setting one up for a security camera at the cabin.
That's a great idea.
Solar cam or solar charger, lithium batteries, so we never have to worry about it.
That'll definitely be the next upgrade.
I've got 1 camera on solar, and I love it. Because it's hard to reach, and I don't like going in there anyway.
Yep.
Because I feel like that's kind of the bedding area. So I try to stay out of there as much as possible, so it's kind of nice. And I'm sick of buying AA batteries, too.
The downfall of having 20 cameras, I looked at how many pictures I had last year. It was 50 or 60,000 pictures for the year. I got to get another external hard drive.
The one mistake I did make, though, with setting up that 1 camera where I don't like going in there, is I didn't cut all the weeds around it.
Oh,
So I burned through my monthly allotment of photos like the first day.
Yeah.
Same kind of deal. Got 50,000 photos of weeds swaying back and forth the first day. But all right. Well, we've got more coming up here on Sporting Journal Radio. We're going to talk mushrooms with Mike Kempenich and Nicole Zempel, and Joe Henry. We'll talk about the differences between Lake Erie and Lake of the Woods when we come back.
852 million acres of public land, 147 million private properties, all in the palm of your hand. The #1 hunting GPS app just got better. With hundreds of custom map layers, 3D and topographic maps, you can easily scout on the road or at home before you go. And now you can get important weather details, CWD detection, and even know what crops have been planted where. Get the most trusted hunting GPS app ever made. OnX. Know where you stand with OnX. Kodiak, a North American waterfowl film, is coming to the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel.
I've been a sea duck hunter for about 30 seconds, and I've already got one that's probably going to go on the wall, so this is the coolest duck hunt I've ever been on.
Presented by Boss Shot Shells, with support from Sitka and Beretta, and additional support from Eau Claire Outdoors, High Prairie Animal Arts, and the Association of Great Lakes Outdoor Writers. Watch Kodiak on the Fish Hunt Forever YouTube channel.
All right, now it's time to check in with Joe Henry from Lake of the Woods Tourism, who is, looks like you're not up at Lake of the Woods currently at the moment, Joe. What's going on there?
Well, I'm just transiting through an airport. You know, I've mentioned to you guys before that I got my captain's license while out on Lake Erie back when I had another career, and I still go out and fish a captain's tournament every year, end of July. It's called the Demeter's Tournament. Real nice tournament. I think there was 31 boats this year. So it's 31 charters by invitation only. 5 people to a charter boat, fishing Canada waters, casting only in the western basin of Lake Erie. And a great opportunity to fish a very competitive tournament on Lake Erie, which is another great fishery in addition to Lake of the Woods. Meet up with the friends and the whole Lake Erie crowd, that's the fishing crowd in the western basin. And I tell you, some really good guys and gals out here. Of course, the fishing scene out here is very rampant, just like it is up at Lake of the Woods. And, you know, it's fun. It's a fun comparison. Of course, got my hands on a bunch of walleyes, which is never a bad thing. And it's good, you know.
Man, I love the airport some days. You just never know. It's just such a great place to people watch. You just never know what's going to happen. And it just sounds like there's a lot going on in the background there, Joe. But talking about that tournament on Lake Erie, it's interesting. Two things stand out to me that I think are kind of interesting. One, that it's casting only, and two, that it's in Canadian waters. Like, that seems odd to me to run a tournament. I mean, is a tournament based in Canada, or is it a U.S. based tournament? How does that work? Because I mean,
that's a good question. First off, I asked the Canada question. The reason it's based it is based in the United States. It's out of the Marblehead area, which is in the Western Basin. But you can go. I mean, when the Canadian line on Lake Erie is halfway across the lake, so consequently, you can go about 10 miles and hit the line. And in the summertime, this deep summer like this, there's deeper water out on the Canadian side in the Western Basin. Consequently, there's a lot more walleyes up there. So they just make it Canada waters because that's where they feel the majority of the walleyes are in the Western Basin this time of year. And it's very common for the charter boats to have their customers get Ontario licenses this time of year. And just slide up into Ontario. There's a lot of deep water. And I say deep water, I think we were fishing in the tournament, around 35 feet of water. I know sometimes you go a little bit east of Lake Erie and on Lake Erie and get into the 40s, and you hit the central basin, you get down to 80, and you go east and you get over to 100 feet deep. So what happens is a lot of those big fish will migrate from the west to the east as the summer goes on, and then they'll make their way back in the fall. The spawning grounds, the majority of the spawning grounds are on the western basin of Lake Erie. So if you see that Pelee Island right there in front of you, the real big island, we were fishing just to the east of Pelee out in that deep water. And they got boundary lines. You can't go anywhere out there. But we were fishing out in that deep water and kind of a little bit of structure out there. Not much structure. It comes up just a couple of feet. But when you're in a huge basin with miles and miles and miles of flat, and you come up just a foot or two, that's structure. That holds fish. And oftentimes the bottom is a little harder. There might be bait there, et cetera, et cetera. So that was the first question. And the second question, the reason it's casting only is, it's interesting. There's two different kind of groups of anglers out here, the trollers and the casters. And I think there's over 800 charter boats on Lake Erie as a whole, and that includes the Western Basin, Central Basin, and out east. But you know what? It's a whole different culture. You know, the casters go out and pretty much they're using weapons. They use an egg sinker with approximately a 2-foot long snelled spinner, and they cast with crawlers. And then in Lake Erie, because you can use 2 lines, also if it's windy out, they'll drag a bottom bouncer and a spinner and crawler. But that's how they do it here. And the trollers, you know, they're going out with jet divers, dipsy divers, downriggers, lead core line. In some cases, if it's shallower water, just big build crankbaits, and they're getting it done that way. But 2 very different cultures. You know, some guys will do both, but usually you're a casting outfitter, or you know, you might be a troller.
You know, the reason I bring up the fact that tournament's conducted in Canadian waters is because when we did our tournament on the Rainy River, because of the permit we got from the Minnesota DNR to conduct that tournament, we couldn't do anything in Canadian waters. So obviously they're working with the Canadian equivalent of the DNR over there to get that tournament done, I'd assume. So there's got to be some parallels between Erie and Lake of the Woods when it comes to border waters like that. Hey, Joe?
There is, yeah, and you know it's the same kind of thing that you can go, like when you're up at the northwest angle in Lake of the Woods. You know, if you're in Minnesota waters, you can slide over the border and go fishing in Ontario waters, as long as you're not touching land, as long as you're not exchanging goods or services with somebody, not touching a dock or anything like that. You can't anchor. But as long as you just go over there and boat into Ontario, you can do that and then come back on the U.S. side without checking into Canada Customs. The caveat is if you touch land. If you touch land, now you have to check in with Canada Customs before you go over. The same is true of, you know, it's a federal regulation with Canada and the United States. So, of course, the same is true with Lake Erie, is that you can, you know, what fascinates me is that, you know, I was on Lake Erie, I was fishing Ontario, but, you know, up at Lake of the Woods, we also fish Ontario. That is such a long distance away. And, you know, up at Lake of the Woods, that part of Ontario is so far north. And here we're so far south. I mean, it's literally the northern portion compared to the southern portion, and it's just a big province. And but it's interesting, you know. And there are a lot of similarities. You know, most of the guys out here are running 30-foot sport crafts. Up at Lake of the Woods, you'll have a combination of 27 and 30-foot sport crafts. You also got some, you know, other boats as well. You know. Grady Whites, and I'll go on and on, but the majority are sport crafts for those charter boats. So that's kind of interesting. A little bit different over here. You don't have like the resorts. Like up at Lake of the Woods, we have the resorts with charter boats that you know, cater to people. And then at the northwest angle, we have more independent guides that have the 20.5-foot walleye boats, and they work with the majority of the resorts. On Lake Erie, it's more independent guides. They might have 2, 3, 4, 5 boats in their fleet, and if they do, they're really kind of based out of like a parking lot. They'll have a freezer there, a fish cleaning station in the parking lot. They might have a big canopy up over some picnic tables where their customers can hang out, and both before and after the fishing day. It's just different.
Sure.
But it's culture, it's fishing, and it's so funny because whenever we talk about the walleye capital of the world up at Lake of the Woods, you know, certainly you can imagine some of the people down here in Lake Erie take a little bit of notice to that. And, you know, and with my friends down here, I tell them, hey, listen, you know, we have that tagline, and it depends, you know, you talk about the walleye capital of the world. Hey, there's pros and cons to everything, man. I mean, you know, we just fished a tournament where I think there was a 10 fish bag limit, and they came up with about, I think it was 257 inches. That's a 25.7 inch average. Well, as you guys remember, and that's with 5 people fishing the boat. If you remember, we just had a tournament on Lake of the Woods, and that was just under a 30-inch average.
Yeah.
If you want to talk about size of fish, Lake of the Woods has size of fish right now. There's not as many big walleyes in Lake Erie. Now, when you talk about numbers, I think Lake Erie has us on numbers. Lake Erie has very inconsistent ice fishing. You cannot get out ice fishing on a regular basis. Most years you can't ice fish, in fact.
Well, I'm a Yeah, I'm a little partial to Lake of the Woods myself, of course. And Joe, it sounds like there's a lot going on there. We're going to let you get back to your airport, your travel day. But if people want to get a trip planned to Lake of the Woods, and there's a couple of tournaments coming up on Lake of the Woods that I want to talk about over the next couple of weeks here on the show that people can participate in, or they want to pay attention to how those tournament anglers are fishing, how they're catching those big fish. We'll talk about it in the next couple of weeks here on the show. But if people want to plan a trip to Lake of the Woods, Joe, what should they do?
What's that? Fish are biting? Come on up. Website, lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Live Target, the leader in Match the Hatch, is back with new lures that also match the action. Introducing the Live Craw. The Live Craw is irresistible to bass, walleye, and other freshwater species. FTech's winner, the Ultimate Frog, looks and acts just like a swimming frog. With an exposed ultra-point mustad hook and replaceable legs, the Ultimate Frog has 2 styles, 2 sizes, and 8 colors. And iCast and FTech's winner, the Live Shrimp, mimics a fleeing shrimp for saltwater anglers. Coming soon from Live Target. Northern Minnesota's Walleye Factory is a year-round world-class fishing destination. The perfect getaway this summer is just a short drive to Lake of the Woods. Fish Big Traverse Bay, the Rainy River, or visit the unique Northwest Angle. To catch big fish, you have to go where the big fish are. Plan your trip to Lake of the Woods at lakeofthewoodsmn.com. That's lakeofthewoodsmn.com.
Well, a recent article that I saw on the Outdoor Feed website talked about how Minnesota is considering putting some limits on mushroom foragers. Now, at first, that to me, it sounded a bit unlikely, but after digging into it, maybe there's something to it. We want to find out, and to learn more about how we got here and what the future might look like, we're joined by the gentleman forager, Mike Kempenich and Nicole Zempel, who does some fast forage segments on Prairie Sportsman with us. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
So, Mike, I'll start with you. I was kind of shocked by this. I didn't see it coming. But is this something that, had you been hearing about, maybe there's a lot of pressure on foraging, maybe there's certain areas that are getting hit a little bit harder. Is this something new? Were you surprised by this, or has this been building for a while?
I guess overall, am I surprised by this? I'm not surprised that it reared its head at some point. And yeah, I've been hearing rumblings about this for a year or more. But like you, I thought, well, I'll be curious what the rationale is behind it. And I think that's the missing link. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? What
is the problem? What do you think? Where did this?
Precisely.
Yeah. So they're discussing mostly like state parks or public lands, right?
Yeah, they are. I think it starts with sort of a misunderstanding about the biology of fungi. And then the analogy that I really like to use is if we had an awesome way that magically a new walleye appeared every time we put one in the live well, would we continue to have limits on walleyes? And the answer, of course, would be no. There'd be no reason to if they magically replace themselves. And fantastically enough, mushrooms magically replace themselves. So, taking every mushroom in the forest one year has absolutely no impact on how many mushrooms will be in the forest next year. So that can't be the problem that they're trying to solve. And I guess there really are 2 sets of problems. One, what is that problem and how does it get solved? But 2, it's been quite frustrating because I, like yourself and so many others, you can't get answers from the DNR. They really, until the governor received a letter and we looked for some help from the legislature and the article came out in the Tribune, they had absolutely refused to have any discussion with the Mycological Society or anybody outside of the DNR. So knowing precisely what their intentions are or precisely what precipitated their desire to look into this is really unknown.
Interesting. So somebody sent them a letter or sent the governor a letter?
Yeah, so the Mycological Society sent a letter to Governor Walz, and really that letter and the Star Tribune article was the first and only time the DNR has reached out to the MMS and said, "Oh, okay, maybe we'll talk a little bit now." Yeah, I mean, I can speculate as to what their motivations might be, and from my perspective, I think it's likely that they feel that because it has become more popular, they for various reasons don't want so many people in the state parks. They want to limit the number of people in the state parks is what it boils down to.
Okay,
they don't like seeing groups of 20 people come in there or 40 people come in there. And for some reason, if it's 20 people who are there for a family reunion, that's okay. But if it's 20 people that are looking for mushrooms, that's a different story to them. Yeah.
So the letter was not somebody complaining about the amount of pressure from foragers. The letter was people saying, "Oh, well, wait a minute. Why do we need this?" So do you think then that there was people in the state parks complaining, or maybe park rangers complaining about all the people just, walking through the woods? Or
yeah, again, pure speculation, but I would think that's. I'll give you one quick example. Last year, I had a foraging group. We were at one of the state parks, and I noted previous to that trip, but I noted that for whatever reason last year, the state parks removed all of their garbage cans. There was virtually no trash receptacles available for anybody to utilize. When we finished with our foray and we went over the mushrooms and we're identifying and talking about them with various people, and these are not edible mushrooms, they're just mushrooms of interest for different reasons. I asked people to go put the mushrooms on the side of the woods there, out of the way of people, and to my surprise, I got a call within the week from that state park, from one of the representatives, basically saying that, hey, we had to have extra staff come and clean up all the mushrooms you left behind. And I found it a little bit curious because, mushrooms disintegrate and are not visible anymore in about 2 or 3 days. It's just natural decomposition. And number two, I took the opportunity to ask him, well, we would have loved to, place them in a receptacle of some kind, but unfortunately, the state park seemed to be void of receptacles for some reason, and I never got a response. So I feel like that there's been a sort of an irritation on the part of the parks, seeing these groups come in there. They feel like, they're not staying on trails, they're walking off paths, they're disturbing the environment. And I guess I take a very different view, which is, we are human animals. We are part of the whole life cycle, the whole chain of events. And whether it's a deer that walks in the woods or a squirrel running around in the trees or foragers walking in the woods, that's just part of life. And quite frankly, I mean, the whole purpose of these state parks is for the enjoyment of the public. It is, it's not the King's Forest. And short of there being some sort of tangible scientific-based reason why this is creating a problem, I'm not following their logic. Now, maybe they have some things that I'm blissfully ignorant of, but again, unfortunately, for reasons that don't make any sense to me, they've been unwilling to have any conversations with anybody who has some expertise in the field of mycology. They've told me flat out that they have nobody, internally on their staff who's a mycologist. So, I wish I had more answers. I wish that there was just a conversation on the front end that said, hey, we're kind of thinking about making some changes here, and here are the reasons why. And everybody could get together and talk about solving a problem, if in fact there is a problem to solve. But their lack of willingness to respond in any way is troubling to me.
Nicole, what was your first impression when you heard about this?
Well, as I said, you had asked to be a part of a conversation about limits, mushroom limits, and I thought, well, what's he talking about? It must be the limitless potential of mushrooms, right? And you clarified, you're like, no, bag limits. And my first thought was, do they know what mycelium is? Do they have an understanding of fungus? And then I kind of went on this little mission to further dig into it and kind of find some reasons, right? Like, not all rules are bad, but some rules are just reactionary, right? And you're not treating whatever the core issue is. And so I had a hard time finding any logical explanation for why they might want bag limits. Ann Pierce, director of Parks and Trails, had mentioned in some articles, well, vegetation is getting trampled. Well, there's an opportunity then to educate the public about the plants and the vegetation, right? Bag limits are not going to stop trampling, only education is. Again, with bag limits on mushrooms are always going to come back, just like what was said. It's kind of like, you have an apple tree. If I pick all the apples from the tree, it's not going to kill the tree, and the apples are going to keep coming back, right? There was also, she had mentioned the issue of spreading of invasives. Well, there's birds out there, there are deer, there's raccoons, everything spreads invasives, right? It's a problem we have. Let's address the root of that problem and educate the public about what those invasives are. So to me, bag limits without any reason based in science, without involvement of people that understand mycelium and mushrooms and the amazing world of fungi, right? To me, this just makes no sense.
Nicole Zempel and Mike Kempenich, our guests on the radio network here. We got to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and I want to ask them what their thoughts, if there were to be limits or licenses that were needed, what that might look like, and what you can go forward for right now. We'll take a quick break and we'll come back with more.
Devil's Lake is legendary, and this summer has been legendary for walleyes. Don't miss out. Call Haybale Heights Campground and Resort today to book one of their modern cabins on East Bay. The cabins are furnished with a full bathroom, kitchen, and all the amenities like high-speed internet, and are clean following CDC guidelines. Staying at Haybale Heights gives you full access to a private boat launch, fish cleaning station, and beach area. Learn more at haybaleheights.com. That's haybaleheights.com. Plan your trip to legendary Devil's Lake today.
Did you know there are more than 1,000 lakes in Otter Tail County?
Yep, and I'm gonna fish as many as I can. I'm an outdoorsy otter. Nothing beats a full day of fishing for me. The lakes of Otter Tail County give me plenty of options to lower my boat and snag the perfect catch. Not an outdoorsy otter? No problem. Otter Tail County has something for everyone. You just need to find your inner otter.
To find your inner otter, go to OttertailLakesCountry.com.
We're back, Sporting Journal Radio. I'm Bret Amundson, along with Dan Amundson and David Eckhardt. And our guests right now, Mike Kempenich and Nicole Zempel, talking about foraging and potential limits on mushrooms. Is that pretty much what they're talking about mostly? Is mushrooms? Have they identified how this would work if they're going to put some sort of limits? Is it mushrooms? Is it plants? What are the specifics on this? Do you guys know?
I had read that it would affect chanterelles, hen of the woods, which is also known as maitake commercially, and also morel mushrooms. And so again, there's literally hundreds of edible mushrooms out there. So why just these three also?
Are they the three most popular? Would that have something to do with it potentially?
It could be, but I feel like if you're really in to mushrooms and exploring that world, I mean, there's so many to learn about and to utilize. But yeah, I'm guessing those are three popular mushrooms.
How realistic is this, and how would you enforce it? I guess there are some limits in other states or other cities. I guess some of this has been done. Can you guys speak to what's being done in other areas when it comes to restricting mushroom hunters out there?
Well, a few years back, California grappled with this issue, and their solution was to essentially disallow foraging in many of the public parks and areas that were previously open.
Wow.
And the unintended consequence was it funneled every forager to the park that they allowed picking in, and it became horrible. And I believe their limit was 5 gallons. The limit I've seen proposed here, if it's accurate, is 1 gallon, which I also find very humorous. If you're going to pick a maitake mushroom, I picked maitake mushrooms that weigh up to 35 pounds. and are as big around as a 4-year-old child. So I'm not sure how I get a gallon of maitake. And again, I think it shows that there's not a lot of scientific thought put into any of this. I think it seems to be a real knee-jerk reaction to a misguided notion of preserving the environment. The environment evolves. It's not the same now as it was 100 years ago, and it won't be the same 100 years from now. And the idea that we can stop rabbits and deer or humans from moving around in the woods and being a part of that transformation is, in my opinion, the height of vanity and pure folly. That's the natural course of events.
If they were to do something like that, do you think it would just be a limit, or do you guys think that they might come up with some sort of license that people would have to purchase, some sort of permit? I mean, because right now, if people forage and then take, say they go out and get morels, Mike, you could maybe answer this better than explain this better than I can, but and then they want to sell them, you already need to get a permit on state lands or in state parks for that, don't you?
There is no commercial foraging allowed in state parks and state forests or any park in Minnesota. So again, that's a non-problem, right? The only place you can legally forage commercially in the state of Minnesota is on private lands. A business like mine has spent more than a decade developing relationships with landowners to do that, but that can't be what they're trying to fix because it's already illegal. Yeah. And if they are having a problem with people picking out of state parks and forests and selling them commercially, I will be there to support whatever efforts they take to stop that. That's unfair competition in my mind, and it's something that I don't support either. So, again, kind of puzzling. It's already illegal, so that can't be the issue they're struggling with.
Okay, that's kind of what I thought. Because I've asked this question on social media in a number of different places, and one of the responses I got was people are just filling up buckets and then selling it all to restaurants or wherever they're selling it. And that's what I because on state land you can't really do any sort of commercial activity without some sort of permit. I know even when we film on state land, we have to go get a permit because it's a commercial activity. So.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And honestly, if that is a problem and they want to fix that problem, it would be actually pretty easy. And there should be traceability for anybody who's selling commercially. And although I don't want the onus to be put on restaurants, they have a hard enough job to work at all day. But it's pretty easy to ask restaurants, what's your source of mushrooms, and to determine if that person is, number one, certified as an identification expert, which you need to be before you do anything commercially in Minnesota. And number two, that they're not harvesting them from some place that's illegal. So honestly, there's probably a fair number of people, especially in the past 5 years, especially through COVID and the shutdown, that thought to themselves, hey, I can go find a few morels, or I can go find a few chanterelles and sell them down at the local restaurant I go to where I kind of know the chef kind of thing, and make a little bit of beer money. I don't have any problem with putting an end to that kind of thing. That's not good for my business, and it's not good for the resource. I get that part of it. But that's not really what they're talking about. What they're really talking about is removing the ability for 75,000 people within about 90 minutes of Minneapolis to forage mushrooms beyond whatever proposal they make. That's how much land it would affect. I mean, statewide, it's 275,000 acres that they will change, people's ability to get out there. And by the way, not everybody's a bushwhacker who's, 30 miles from Canada in the middle of real wilderness and willing to do that, like Gentleman Forager might be. Most people are just average people that are going out with their kids or their family for the weekend, and they want to go hunt some mushrooms. Maybe you're an Eastern European immigrant, and it's a huge part of your family's background and the fun you do. Just like we might grow up fishing here, a lot of Eastern Europeans grow up with picking mushrooms is a big part of their social and family activities. And saying to all of those people that because of this unknown problem, we're going to either completely revoke your ability to hunt and forage mushrooms within a reasonable distance to your home, or restrict it in such a way that it really doesn't make a lot of sense to go out and do it.
Yeah, Nicole, I mean, you're western Minnesota, more rural, maybe less affected by the pressure than maybe around the metro or the Twin Cities metro. Do you see a lot of pressure? Do you see a lot of people? Are you on public or private or both? And what do you see for people out there?
Any and all. And I do see like an increased interest in people wanting to learn about the land, right? And that was one of the issues, the DNR had mentioned, well, an increase in foragers and an increase in forays. My thought is that's opportunity for them to further educate the public, right? And out here in the rural area, I do see increased people out there, but I look at that as a good thing, right? And I feel like if rules are going to be put in place, they need to be rules that are grounded in science and clearly defined. But again, I just feel like until they can do that, they're treating a symptom. And I think the real issue is, what are people's relationship with the land, right? Those are developing now. That's a good thing. And so I feel like they should put resources into engaging the public and encouraging activity on parklands, and also better education while they're there. So,
and I agree with all of that, and I think it is great to give people another reason to get outside. Do you think that maybe this is a little bit of a proactive approach, or preemptive? Maybe they're trying to keep a problem from happening, and then along those same lines, maybe it's not a limit necessarily. Somebody brought up the fact that maybe somebody should have a license to do it, and again, my first thought is, come on, a license to go pick mushrooms, or pick blueberries or whatever the case may be. It seems ridiculous, but at the same time, when you're talking about public lands, there's an argument that we've had a lot of times where if somebody's out there, say bird watching on a WMA, and they're out there enjoying these lands that mostly hunters have paid for, it's like, well, why shouldn't they? Maybe they should have a bird watching license, or how can they contribute? So when it comes to, they become a consumptive user at that point on maybe a state wildlife management area. Should there be some sort of license that people should have to forage on public lands? What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't have a big problem if there was a nominal license attached to it. However, having said that, life experience tells me if they start going down this road and they attach licensing to it, God knows where it ends up over time.
I agree with that.
But, to your point, supporting the environment and sort of, paying for a little bit of your use. And, I don't think most people would disagree with that. And by the way, foraging in the foraging community, by and large, and I've been doing this for a very long time now, they're very thoughtful about the environment. These are people that probably already have a relationship throughout their life with the great outdoors. This is not a case of marauding foragers going out to pick massive amounts of mushrooms and selling them illegally. This is not really what it's about. It's apparently about too many people enjoying the great outdoors, which boggles my mind. We live in an age right now where everybody talks about how do we get our kids off the computer and away from their phone, or all of us included. And here we have this resurgence in an outdoor activity that promotes family and friends and the great outdoors in a very low impact manner, and we have a big stop sign going up, and it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, that's always the tough part, right? Like where is the balance? Because you don't want it to be a a free for all. Not saying this would create some sort of free for all situation, but you also need to have some management out there. It's why I'm glad I don't work for the DNR. Like I get mad at the DNR for plenty of things, but at the end of the day, some of them have to make some tough decisions, and they're never making everybody happy. It just seems like this just seems like such a non-issue to me because of the fact that, maybe ramps, I feel like ramps are the one thing that I can come up with, and maybe you guys can give me better examples, but ramps seem like the one thing where maybe you have to be, a little careful about over harvest. Is there anything else like that, or should there be I tell you what, I want you to answer that, but for our radio network, we got to let you guys go. We're going to continue this discussion on our podcast or on our YouTube channel. So thank you for tuning in to the radio show. To continue this, join us online on YouTube or on the podcast. Do you think, is there anything else out there like ramps where there could be an over harvest type situation?
I think with any kind of plant, there's always that potential right now because we're living in a day and age of massive habitat loss, right? And so many of our native plant species, they're already threatened just by virtue of habitat loss. So again, that's where understanding the plant communities, sustainable harvest, having like a relationship of reciprocity with the land comes into play. Ramps, for example, 9 years to produce seed. So if you dig up that bulb of that ramp, it's gone, right? It's gone forever. I personally just harvest the greens of ramps and I stagger my harvest, but that's a whole another topic. But any plants, I've been harvesting now for teas, a lot of bergamot, a lot of yarrow. And again, you can destroy plant habitats without sustainable harvest.
I echo, what Nicole is saying there. And again, I think it's a missed educational opportunity. For Gentleman Forager, we've harvested ramps off private acreage for more than a decade now, and we actually have more ramps now than there were 10 years ago. And the reason is because we're well aware of, as Nicole is describing, the life cycle of that plant and what we can and can't do to support, not delete, but support larger populations of the plant, and have been able to successfully do so. And, educating the public on how that works and how we can all do that is something that would be a benefit. Back to what we said earlier, it's already illegal to harvest ramps or any plant life on any public lands in Minnesota. So it's I personally, and I'm sure the MMS feels the same way, we would love to work with the DNR. We would love to work hand in hand with the DNR and have these discussions and find out what their thoughts are and have that back and forth discourse and figure out, if there really is a problem to solve and work together to solve it. But in order for that to happen, they have to be willing to have those conversations.
Sure. So I'm going to ask this question to both of you guys. Maybe Nicole, maybe I'll start with you. Moving forward, what do you think the answer is when it comes to either limits or licensing or anything like that? And any sort of regulations? If the DNR was going to do anything, what would you like to see?
I would like to see, if they have an idea, right, let's communicate with the appropriate people that know more than they do about whatever the issue is, and some clear reasoning identified. Without providing the public that, I don't even know how I can answer, your question. I think do you think there should be limits, or do you think maybe it depends on the type of property you're on, or what do you think? I think that if I'm going to a state park and I'm going to go forage or whatever I'm foraging for, mushrooms, right? I should, if I find them and I harvest them and I'm not destroying that mycelial network underground, they're going to pop up the next day and the day after that for other folks to stumble upon and harvest as well. I kind of feel like if you're out there, it's for the enjoyment of being out there and what you stumble upon.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's a giant Easter egg hunt for everybody, the mushrooms are going to keep coming. It's not an issue. It's a complete non-issue. I really don't want to see it go down the road at all. I just think when that camel gets its nose under the tent without actual scientific reasoning behind their decisions, I think we're taking it in a direction that will have unintended consequences that will not be good. And my greatest hope is that the DNR rethinks this and says, gee, maybe we moved a little faster. Maybe we should involve the Mycological Society. Maybe we should involve some stakeholders like a gentleman forager and find out, what are some of these unintended consequences, or is the science that we're considering accurate? Or are we maybe sort of using some blanket science to apply to one kingdom, fungi, that maybe doesn't apply to the animal kingdom? And I think if we had some open dialogue, I don't know why we couldn't come to some reasonable resolution to, again, whatever the secret problem might be. I think it just takes a little bit of it takes a willingness on the part of the state, specifically the DNR, to realize that all of the people, all of the citizens who use that resource are stakeholders. And to do this behind closed doors without any discussion or any information is just wrong. It's wrong on many levels.
All right. Well, let's talk about what opportunities there are right now and what might be coming up for people that do want to go out there and do some foraging, maybe under the cover of darkness with as many buckets and no license that they want to find out there. Nicole, you've been out recently? It sounds like. What have you been out there looking for?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of out there anytime I'm not at my day job. I'm out in the woods or on the prairie. Been harvesting some chanterelles, oyster mushrooms. Again, all of this is rain and weather dependent as well. Let's see, because we're kind of in a drought condition, I've gone more toward plants. And of course, many of the native species I harvest, they're drought tolerant, right? Or very resistant to drought. And so as far as plants go, it's been great. Mushrooms, we need some rain.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember now. You did a fast forage for us with you were doing something with cottonwood trees. What was that?
Yeah. The cottonwood buds, actually. There is, so the sticky stuff, right, that's on those buds, it's a resin, and in that resin is kind of a medicine. So it contains antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, a million antis. It's like great. So I take that, I put the buds in carrier oil, and then I create like a healing salve or balm, which works great for wounds, burns. It's helped folks with like psoriasis and eczema. So it's kind of just a little miracle in a jar.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I've never heard anything good about cottonwood trees.
I know, they get a bad rap. They get a bad rap.
It's great for fishing.
Yeah. Mike, how about you? Have you been out walking around?
Yeah, it's been a really interesting year. I feel like more and more every year I'm saying this, which is, wow, what a weird weather pattern we have.
Yeah.
It's definitely, I would say, from St. Cloud down, quite dry, and the mushrooms, you got to sort of find the right conditions and the right microclimate to find a few. You get a little bit further north, and especially in northwest, the rains have been much better. Chanterelles are just starting to go reasonably well now. Lobster mushrooms are out. We're seeing a few porcini-like genuses that we have here in Minnesota. I'm sure black trumpets will be close behind. So it's a later start to the season. I would say at least 2 weeks later than is normal. But other than that, if you're looking at an area that has some reasonably decent rainfall, it's a really fun time, and it only continues to get better from now until, really we pick until typically the end of October, and September is really probably the best month is September. So we're just kind of starting, or have just started the prime time of mushroom foraging.
I don't know if we want to go down this road or if this is really in your wheelhouse or not, but with all the discussion and the legalization of things that are happening, even here in Minnesota, but in other areas when they talk about psychedelics, do you guys want to talk about the potential of legalizing, the magic mushrooms here in
just decriminalized in Minneapolis this week or something?
Did they decriminalize it?
Yeah, I think so.
Mayor Fry signed an executive order to deprioritize investigations, which I guess means they're just going to look the other way. I'm super excited about it. Honestly, it's there's more and more studies taking place. The federal government is allowing more and more studies to take place, and the information we already have, and the more we're learning about their therapeutic and medicinal abilities, it's absolutely fascinating. And I think that the more it's discussed openly, the more people are realizing that it's not just something for old hippies or young kids looking for a fun weekend. It can really be incredibly helpful in treating things like PTSD or alcoholism and drug abuse and a myriad of other anxiety disorders and so forth. So truly fascinating. I'm really happy to hear the mayor sign that order, and I hope that it speeds along the process of legalizing it completely here in Minnesota at some point. And that we can openly study what at least would appear to be right now one of the best, most effective medicines for treating a myriad of mental health issues.
It's interesting. It just seems like, when I first started to hear about that, it just seems like something that would. It just seems like the exact opposite of what people have used it for in the past. Does that make sense?
Yeah, very much. I mean, I think for people who used it in the past, there was always a deep curiosity in the sort of cathartic quality that it had, like after a person, would take the mushroom and have that experience. I think internally, many people, myself included, would think, wow, I had so many sort of eye-opening moments and thoughts. I feel more empathy towards my friends and family. All of these things would affect your way of thinking in a very positive way. And it was sort of like a side note to maybe why you took it to begin with. But really fascinating side note to it. So I think making that change from, there's a lot of things that we just don't know about quite right now. But we're getting close to understanding. We know what it does in many respects. And we're really looking deeper into why it does what it does. And imagine if at some point they figure that out and are able to, to virtually sort of unlock unused portions of our brains that give us incredible abilities, helpful abilities in health and wellness. I mean, honestly, it makes me shiver thinking about it. I think it's a really incredible front end of research that we're on here, and I think that there will be some really great things that come of it.
It's really kind of amazing when you think about the health benefits that mushrooms have. I think a lot of people have a hard time wrapping their head around, that eating a fungus could be so beneficial in a lot of different ways. And you've got a mushroom drink coming out, right, Mike? Is that?
We do.
Will that give people some of the same? Will there be some health benefits for people that maybe they don't like eating a mushroom, like maybe the texture or the idea of eating one? Will they be able to get some health benefits out of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a big part of why we produce these value-added mushroom products, right? Not everybody, as much as I try and make them love mushrooms, not everybody's going to love biting into a mushroom for various reasons, taste or texture or whatnot. What we've done, and we did a couple of years back, with something we called Brain Butter, which was a peanut butter with lion's mane mushroom. And this time, in about another 6 or 8 weeks, we'll be debuting Gentleman Forager's Headwater, which we're making in partnership with Lakes and Legends Brewing here in Minneapolis, which one will contain lion's mane mushroom and one will contain chaga. And I picked these two to begin with because they're the most well-studied. They both have, great major university studies that tout their effectiveness and abilities to, in the case of lion's mane, extremely helpful in cognitive mental decline. Lots of studies going on its usefulness to stave off things like Alzheimer's and dementia. And these studies are pretty solid. One in particular, it really shows that if you're consuming lion's mane on a daily basis, and not a lot, about 500 milligrams a day, which is not a lot, you actually become smarter, like intense smarter.
How do I order?
Over a long period of time. And interesting enough, too, if they stopped taking it, the scores went back down, right? And so it helps create new synapses in your brain. Lots of great things. Chaga is, is an adaptogen for your body and affects a lot of regulatory function. And super healthy. It's also been studied for its ability to reduce the size of cancerous tumors. Putting these, one will be an orange lion's mane, so it's just pure fruit essence, organic. It's just organic mushroom, organic lion's mane mushroom. It's just a lightly flavored, non-alcoholic carbonated beverage that's delicious. You won't taste the mushroom at all. And the chaga is a blueberry chaga. Same thing. It just tastes like a really tasty drink. I suspect that people will enjoy just drinking the drink because it's really good and feeling good that, hey, if I'm going to have a cold beverage, a refreshing cold beverage, why wouldn't I have one that also is helpful to my health?
Was blueberry chosen because find them both up in the Northeast? Did they have a connection, or did you just say blueberry tastes good, we're going to do this?
A little bit of both, like we try and keep everything as close to the bone of being wild and foraged as we can. And also, come on, blueberry's a really good flavor. So, it went well together.
Where can we find your products? Can we order online?
We'll be opening up a landing page for exactly that in about 2 weeks at gentlemanforager.com, and people can begin to pre-order. But we expect that it'll start out here locally in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area and then regionally. And hopefully, if it's well received, we'll roll that out nationally in the coming year here. And
Nicole, I feel like all throughout the year you're coming out with different products and things like that. What are you working on right now? Where can we find your stuff?
So right now, I love mushrooms, but plants are actually, I'm super passionate with utilizing plant medicines. So I just do simple little setups, right? Like at makers markets. I'm looking at maybe some farmers markets as well. But right now I'm working on different dried teas from a variety of wild medicinal plants. Of course, I do the salves and the balms, not just with cottonwood bud, but I utilize red willow, also plantain. So really just any variety. And I love hosting little informal workshops, right, where we go out and kind of collect things, talk about them. I feed people different wild foods, and I just show people, hey, nature's here to help us, not hurt us, and the more you understand, the less you fear.
Yeah, well, I think it's fascinating. Both of you guys, I'm really impressed with what you guys do. You've both been big contributors to Prairie Sportsman. I really appreciate that. And I learned something. David, I know you do some foraging. I feel like every time I talk to you guys, I learn something. And but to really get into it the way you guys have, I would need to eat a lot of lion's mane, I think. I need to
got you covered.
Oh, perfect. I need to be a lot smarter, but definitely some health benefits and interesting and always, there's some controversy with some of it, obviously. So it's interesting to see where we go from here. And I'm guessing once we hear a little bit more, maybe we'll have you guys back on the show to talk about it again. But Mike Kempenich, Gentleman Forager, and of course Nicole Zempel, appreciate the time today on the show. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Sporting Journal Radio is a division of Macaba LLC. If you've got a question, comment, or story idea for us, send us an email. Go to sportingjournalradio.com. While you're there, you can learn how to advertise on the show and visit our store for hats, hoodies, coffee mugs, and more. Go to sportingjournalradio.com.